Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Pod. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next amazing guest, and he is Mr. Brad Myers, and he is the CEO and co-founder of RevMethods. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So good to have you along for the ride today. And you were mentioning off air that you had been exposed to my podcast before. You listened to some episodes before, and then our mutual friend, Kyler Nixon, also made an e-intro to us on LinkedIn, and he said, look, you got to have Brad on your podcast. And so here we are.
Yeah, no, I appreciate Kyler. I appreciate the invitation. And kind of one of the reasons why is I counted on you to be my steep learning curve back into the industry, because I'm doing, as I'm sure we'll talk about in a sec, but circling back to the world of industrial manufacturing, distribution, e-com.
Wow, I absolutely love it. You've been running RevMethods for nearly 9 years now. So 4 years longer than I've been running my consultancy. And so it's an exciting time to be in this space. And I certainly have seen, particularly over the last couple of years, I think the first couple of years of my consultancy were a little bit lean. I felt like more of an evangelist than I did a consultant, and trying to make sure that the industry was growing, that it saw the opportunity, that it realized that, look, COVID is not the last time you're going to have massive disruption to the physical side of your business. And so you need to have, as a manufacturer and distributor, you need to have more strings to your bow than a field sales team. I really saw our industry start to turn a corner pretty seriously 2.5 years ago, to where a lot more manufacturers and distributors started to get religion around digital commerce for two reasons. One is they realized that it would bring efficiency to their business and perhaps claw back a little bit of profit for their businesses. But then they also had the gun put to their head by a lot of their customers. So if you're a manufacturer, having the gun put to your head by your distributor or dealers of a distributor, they were forcing their suppliers to move more towards digital services. And that was something that they'd been asking for a long time, but they started to, the trickle turned into a flood. And all of a sudden, most of these suppliers realized, geez, if we don't get our act together here, we're going to potentially be losing a lot of business, or not even be in the running for business where, for example, we might need to do a tender or quote a situation, and where that tender requires us to serve them digitally, whether that be EDI, punch out, self-service e-commerce, whatever it is. If we don't offer those services, we can't even bid for those contracts. We can't even bid to supply to government or large industrial procurement or whatever it might be. And so I certainly have seen the industry come around over the last couple of years and start to get a little bit of digital religion, and AI and agentic procurement is really adding fuel to that fire. Are you seeing the same thing out there?
I definitely am. And I think you're spot on that they're getting pulled into it. Having listened to a number of your podcasts, you often talk about the digital native buyer now, right? That the millennials are the ones, 70% And I think that's very true. And I think the days, it's not a either or. I think the old B2B belly to belly selling will continue. I think the challenge now is, how do we e-commerce enable those sales teams? Or if you are a true one single channel e-commerce, how do you take advantage of all that digital traffic that's coming to your site and convert it more? And I think kind of the gap between the reality and the capacity of the industry is both the challenge, but it's also, I think, the opportunity for you and I and everyone that's playing in the space.
Yeah, and was it always your vision, and we'll get into RevMethods, the specifics of how the platform works, but was it always your intention to target your services at the B2B market? Was that always the goal with the platform, was we're going to service what you considered to be an underserved part of the market? Was that always the vision?
Yeah. The irony is, like, backed into e-commerce and industrial companies again. Just, I won't go all the way to the beginning of time, my first job per se, but I had been a chief revenue officer at a number of technology companies, SaaS companies, early stage, Series A, Series B. And my passion was running both the sales and marketing team, how to get those two teams working together. My sales team was constantly complaining about not having enough leads and pointing to get to the goal that I just handed them, pointing their finger accusatorily at marketing, saying, look at all those qualified leads we've dropped at their door and they haven't even picked up the phone. And so I set out to try to solve that. And we could talk about that, but that's what ended up becoming RevMethods. So I went to market with this idea from a services consulting background. So when you talked about my 9 years of RevMethods, 7 of those 9 were me being a fractional chief revenue officer of a number of SaaS companies and seeing this pattern. And then getting a hankering for, hey, I want to productize something that I'm doing here. And that's what became RevMethods over the last 2 years. So I went to market thinking this was for SaaS, for technology. What happened was I got introduced to about a $60 million manufacturer in Columbus, Ohio. They make fencing. And I'm in the early days. I'm not going to say no to anybody. I said, here's the script. Let's try it out. And I candidly had low expectations. I didn't think their traffic would be much. I knew that they are very much an engineering-led company first, secondarily sales. Marketing is the caboose, right? Not as important.
As many industrial companies are, or sometimes they don't even have a marketing team or a marketing department.
Correct. What blew me away was within a month of seeing their traffic, and we'll talk about that, I discovered they had the most valuable, richest, organic website traffic of any tech company I was working with. This manufacturer did. And I was like, is this an outlier or is this the thing? So I ended up proactively going out and finding a second one, an HVAC manufacturer in Wisconsin. Same thing. They had not a lot of volume per se, maybe 3,000 visitors a month, but super high quality. And 98% of them, they didn't even know who they were.
Wow.
So we still do sell to SaaS, but most of my proactive outbound and where I'm trying to focus and the conferences that we talked about are very much focused on industrial companies, manufacturing and distribution, because I think there's a huge opportunity to help them extract more value from the traffic they already have. And my hypothesis of why this is because unlike these SaaS companies who are at best 10 years old, usually 2 to 5, these industrial companies have been around for minimum 20 years, maximum 150 years. They have incredible brand awareness in their niche. And as their clients, as you talked about, are becoming more digitally active and they're coming to the website, they are organically arriving. So they're not even paid. Because that's the other thing I see with SaaS companies. They spend a lot of money on paid ads, which just creates so much noise on the website.
Yeah. The CAC is just sky high.
Yes, the CAC is high. And I think we're blessed in the manufacturing and distribution and e-commerce world, where almost by default through history, we have tremendous website traffic. So how can we help harness that and make it and commercialize it, e-commerce the sales team with it?
Yeah, no question about it. I think that this is something that, even from an e-commerce perspective, even if a manufacturer or distributor offers some sort of self-service e-commerce function or capability within the business, let's say it's gated or whatever it is, I think what the challenge is with these businesses is that they're operators, they're not marketers, right? It's just the way that they're wired. They're wired to be operators, whether that be you're dealing with a CTO or whether you're dealing with a CRO, a chief revenue officer, or maybe a VP of sales or something like that, or you're dealing with a COO in the business, or you're dealing with the broader leadership team. The real challenge here is that many of these businesses, they don't have a lot of digital capability in the business. It's just not the way they're wired. Their IT teams are focused on ERP, CRM, and other system integrations. Their sales team is focused on CRM, pipeline management. How many phone calls, how many field sales visits can I make? How much can I turn that into revenue? How can I take my clients out to boozy drinks on a Friday afternoon? How can I take them to a football game on a Saturday? How can I keep those relationships alive? How can I knock on more doors? How can I go and acquire more clients and more third-party agents for our products? And so as a result of that, there's so many like in the weeds operators in these businesses that oftentimes marketing is at best an afterthought, and digital chops and digital capabilities are way down the list of priorities. And so they rarely, in my experience, I have yet to work with a manufacturer or distributor that has a CDO, a chief digital officer. It just doesn't. Now that's very common in retail. It's very common in retail omnichannel or D2C, but it's almost non-existent in B2B. And certainly even having a head of e-commerce or a director of e-commerce or even a basic e-commerce manager is a very rare skill or position that these businesses have internally. And so oftentimes when I'm going and I'm consulting, I'm working like the head of business systems, for example, or I'm working with somebody else. And oftentimes it's always through that lens of what do our sales teams need, right? And so this is what can we do to help make our sales teams more efficient? And I don't know if you see this, but I'd love your thoughts on this, is that when I go into consult and when a manufacturer or distributor tracks their sales rep's time by activity, somewhere between 20 and 60% of a sales rep's time is pure admin. So they're driving to a client site, or they're driving back from a client site, or they're taking an order on site and they're taking it back to the office and they're keying it into an ERP, or they're receiving an email from the customer for a quote request, and then they take 2-3 days to turn the quote request around and email it back to them. There's just so much double handling of almost every single function that a salesperson does in the B2B world that it feels like they are just unaware of how digital can help their business. And do you see the same thing when you first start working with these businesses? They don't even know where to start when it comes to digital.
100%. And digital literally touches every aspect of the company, right? I'm just talking about an important part, but it's the kind of the top of funnel. It's trying to drive pipeline and ultimately revenue. But some of the examples you talked about were further downstream: quote requests, inventory, stock control type
Checks.
stuff. Yes, all of the above are challenges, and it's a challenge for these companies to figure out what the priority is, right? And I think the bias oftentimes is more on that back end stuff, because they are, for the most, again, we're painting with a broad brush here. They tend to be, I was just talking to a $2 billion manufacturer in Indiana yesterday. They run their CRM out of Excel.
Wow.
Their what was their ERP? Oh, Microsoft. But as he was lamenting, the marketer that was lamenting the tech stack on his side, the reality is the tech stack on the engineering side was top notch. That's what they're good at. And I think that's part of the challenge. Every company has a culture. Every company has a function that kind of leads your engineering led, your sales led, your marketing led. When you talk about D2C, B2C, they tend to be marketing led.
Yep.
They have to be. They die otherwise. Which again, candidly, that's where our technology even evolved from. It had already been widely adopted in D2C, and I saw this opportunity to bring it over to B2B because it's the same problem at a smaller scale. But I think yes, that's a challenge. And then as far as the org chops that you talked about at the top of that, yes, again, I don't want to overgeneralize, but marketing, again, it's not the driver usually of functionally at a B2B company. I'm encouraged by who I'm engaging with. Maybe I'm self-selecting. There's some of that for sure. But there is the one thing I'm also reminded of, this ecosystem that is e-commerce, is how important the ecosystem is. And there's a lot of talent within the agency world and within the partnership world that can backfill for that. And arguably that might be the way to go if you don't have it.
I think it also helps. Sorry to interrupt. I think it also helps to point out, or helps you better understand the gaps, because we all have blind spots, right? And so some of these businesses just purely have blind spots. And so sometimes it takes someone from the outside the fishbowl, to help you identify those blind spots so you can fill them.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And even these agencies, you talked about agentic AI earlier, they're grappling with the new stuff.
Yes.
So how is someone in-house that maybe isn't bleeding edge going to figure this stuff out? So I think even if you don't have it in-house, I think you can access it. And I try to encourage the folks that do to do.
I love that. And if we talk specifically about the RevMethods model and platform, look, in all transparency with the audience, I've never used it, never deployed it, never worked with it. So I have to go buy what's on the tin or on the website, so to speak. And I almost, and I'm sure you're going to correct me if I'm wrong here, I almost think of you as a retention.com or a visual visitor or a lead post, or similar types of technologies that are very heavily focused on either SaaS or retail, but you're very much focused on the B2B world instead. And so I feel like there's similarities between your platform and some of these other platforms that try to, for lack of a better term, identify who the hell is visiting our website, even if they don't authenticate. So who is it that is visiting us? And even if we're running something like Microsoft Clarity, or running something else that's recording sessions and doing heat mapping and all those wonderful things about trying to identify how we can improve our website experience, they don't tell us who those visitors are. They authenticate them. We know who they are. And the challenge is, oftentimes in the B2B world, we have a lot of visitors that can't authenticate because they don't yet have an account with us. And so therefore, they're coming to browse. They're coming there to see what we carry. They're coming there to find out our contact information. They're trying to they're trying to achieve lots of different things even before they authenticate on our websites. And in many cases, these horrible B2B websites, these horrible legacy websites, they're gated. So you can't log in. You literally cannot log in or create an account until you have an account with them that's been approved by the finance department and you've gone through the credit checks and everything else and been assigned a credit account and a credit account limit. And so it feels like what you're trying to do is to make sure that these B2B businesses that have worked for, in some cases, decades to build up their name in their given niche, that they can capitalize on the traffic that is generating and actually create effectively a warm lead or opportunity list for these sales reps to reach out to.
That's exactly right. And I think that last point is warm. It's obviously not as warm as someone who raises their hand and says, I want a quote. And when you talked about authenticate, just to clarify, what we mean is that someone has submitted a form and quote unquote converted in some way, which whatever tool you have typically drops a cookie on them at that point. And then every time they show up, you can keep seeing them so long as they don't clear their cookies.
Yes.
And that is exactly what we're trying to do for B2B companies. And what we've learned on the B2B side is I told you in e-commerce and digital or industrial in large, the traffic is just so rich and valuable and organic and it's earned. Yes. So the question is, how can we help industrial companies take advantage of all this brand equity that they've built up over decades, right? And also marketing can then retarget them or sales can figure out how to engage them. I often will bring up Nordstrom's as an example of helping is selling, right? You don't want to say, hey, big brother, I saw you on my website visiting page X.
Yes.
You want to be authentic when you reach out to them. But that is the opportunity. And the one thing maybe B2B, B2C as well that is different is in direct to consumer, one of our learnings early when we first adopted this tech is that all Warby Parker needs is a Gmail, right?
Yes.
They're not going to ask, yes, they probably like to know demographic information, et cetera. But in B2B, there is a lot of massaging of data, site traffic data, to make sure it's valuable. And the hard lesson we learned throughout last year was I can't rely on our clients to invest too much time burning calories trying to figure out how to separate the signal from the noise. One of our key things that we've learned is not only do we resolve the traffic, but how do we help identify who's in their ICP, who's their ideal customer? Is it still a valid email? Again, Gmail, I've had my Gmail since Google first made them available. Yeah, so it changed, but my business email's probably changed. I'm embarrassed to say how many times it changed since that same day. And so we got to validate the email. And then lastly, oftentimes these aren't purely transactional. There's a relationship there, especially if sales is involved. So it's not, it's you buy a pair of shoes and you're gone. And now you're buying a suite of things in an industrial context, or there's multiple stakeholders that you need to connect the dots to. Correct. So how do we bring this into your system of record, usually a CRM, and allow you to understand that context because that'll inform how you reach out. Is it a customer? Is it a former prospect? Is it someone new to world, et cetera?
And I guess then you also can ingest an existing customer list, for example, and you can say, look, let's dedupe that against or match that up against an existing customer list from a CRM or something like that. Okay, you've already got contacts at this customer. They've visited your website, but they didn't authenticate, but we know who they are. We've effectively fingerprinted them. And now we can show you and we can segment out people that you already have a working relationship with. We're probably not going to necessarily want to do some sort of custom follow-up with those types of visitors, but where we do want to follow up is with people who are not in our database, who are not existing customers, who are not existing opportunities, or we want to further enrich those opportunities that maybe already are sitting in our CRM, but maybe they're cold leads, cold opportunities, or maybe they lack enrichment, they lack context, they lack role types, they lack a lot of stuff. Oftentimes the data that ends up in a CRM is thin on the ground at best, and you might have been at a trade fair or trade show and somebody puts their name into the draw for something, right? And so you're lucky if you get just a name and an email address sometimes, and maybe their company that they work for, and usually you have to extrapolate that by their company email address. And so it's a hard game, this whole B2B thing. And the reality is that most buyers in the B2B world now, they are doing their own homework online first. They are looking for their suppliers on their own initiative. They're not waiting for a field sales rep to come and knock on their door. They're not waiting for a field sales rep to come and pick up the phone and call them. They're not waiting for a cold inbound email from a sales rep to say, oh, hey, do you need my stuff? They're being proactive. They're shortlisting a list of suppliers based on the information they can glean online. And then they will reach out when they're good and ready. And they will visit those websites when they're good and ready. And they'll do their own homework across their networks, social networks, LinkedIn, etc. And this is a key change in the buying cycle in the B2B world that I think has changed dramatically just in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. Forrester came up with a stat I think a year ago that said 70% or 71% of B2B buyers already have a short list of suppliers before they even need the product. 91% of them have a preferred one, right? So we're already up against it to begin with, which again, we can wait until they raise their hand. That might be the 91. That's actually not the right ratio for this situation, but the very few that have you as the preferred vendor.
Yes.
Or you widen your aperture and try to understand what's happening at the middle of the funnel or the upper end of the bottom of the funnel and who is doing that research. Because by definition, if they hit your site, you got brand awareness. They know who you are. This is not top of funnel activity. This isn't high expense acquisition with Google to get paid words and others to try to reach people before they even know who you are, right? This is, they've been on your website consciously, or they did click on something. So you have some vestige of awareness. How can you now move them forward in some authentic brand appropriate way through a combination of marketing and sales and connect the dots? It's very data driven, which is both the challenge and the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think going beyond even the traditional idea of, oh, hey, cool, we know who they are, we've got their email address, let's just bang out an email, let's create a new email segment in our email platform, and let's bang out an email to them en masse, and then, hey, look, depending on the response rates, let's get it back. There's the other beautiful thing about the B2B world is there are ways to target them and their companies on LinkedIn, for example. There's ways to make sure and guarantee that your content gets in front of them. If you know who they are, you can guarantee that your content's going to get in front of them. You can then better target them when they go to the trade shows, when they go to the fairs, when they go to their local conference, when they go to the local conference for the ERP that they run, when they go to the local conference for the CRM that they run. There are ways to get in front of your customers in much more clever ways than just an outbound email in the B2B world that allows us to be a little more subtle, that allows us to just make sure that, and it allows us also to create lookalike audiences from those audiences as well, so that we can engage businesses like those businesses. And I think that's also a very important part of this, is we're starting to take a few pages out of that retail handbook, which is in the retail e-commerce space, creating lookalike audiences and retargeting them with ads is like the standard playbook. Everybody does that. And so B2B is only just starting to figure out that we can get real hyper targeted if we know who we're targeting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the beauty about B2B, it is the average order value is typically a lot larger.
And it's not just the average order value, it's the CLV, the lifetime value.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. And the lifetime value as well. That's right.
Is insanely high, because usually these relationships are at a minimum multi-year, in some cases, multi-decade relationships.
That's right. I just lost my train of thought, but yes, I 100% agree. It's again, a huge opportunity. And I guess my point is, it doesn't have to cost that much to mine what you have. You paid for it. You pay for it through brand equity. You can go pay for paid acquisition. The question is, let's till the soil. Let's find what we have. Let's be like that Nordstrom's associate who walks up to you and says, John Nordstrom, I guess it's the founder, once said, never let, again, this is maybe not appropriate in today's word, but back in 1908 or whatever, he said, never let a lady leave the store without buying a pair of shoes.
Yes.
That's the ethos that I think all those associates have when you walk into a Nordstrom's. It's helping is selling. It's very brand appropriate. It's polite. It's not pushy. And how many times have we done that and said, I got a wedding on Friday night. I need a black belt. And you also walk out with a new jacket.
Well, and
right?
I think it's also at bats, right? It comes down to the number of at bats we get with a prospect or an opportunity or a
Mhm.
customer or a cohort type. How many at bats can we give ourselves to get in front of that customer in all different ways? It might even end up being a piece of postal mail that in the retail world, they're now with Postpilot and other platforms, we can now integrate physical postal mail into our marketing automation workflows in ways that we never could before. And that's actually, in some respects, getting greater cut through than just emails and SMSs and push notifications because everybody's blind to a lot of that stuff now. They're not as blinded to postal mail because they don't get a lot of it now. And so if you get something that's stand out in terms of the experience of postal mail, that can sometimes get cut through in ways that other forms of marketing cannot anymore. And so it's wild how the digital space has evolved like this. And I think even if I go back to mirror your story about Nordstrom's, when I was younger in a former life, I worked selling cars in a dealership, right? And there was a rule. There was an absolute rule. If you can't sell a customer when you're talking to them, you will get fired if you do not turn them to another salesperson to give them the opportunity to close that opportunity right then and there. Or if you don't escalate to a sales manager and give them the opportunity to close that customer right then and there, you can be fired on the spot for doing that if you get caught doing that. And so there is this concept of the more at bats you can get, the greater opportunity you get to close a customer on an opportunity. And so I think that is really important in the B2B world. And I think because historically the B2B world has operated on almost exclusively on the concept of monopolies, right? So we had monopoly manufacturing in some categories. We then had master distributors that had a monopoly. We then had sub distributors that had a monopoly, like on a specific region or on a specific group of products or whatever it might be. And everybody along the value chain was protected by these monopolies, right? The distributors would pass business to the manufacturers would pass inquiries directly to the distributors, and nobody really had to do effective marketing because if the industry wanted what you sold, you were probably the only place they could go and get it. And so therefore, they just didn't have a lot of external threats. That's not the case anymore. And so therefore, these businesses have to start to get religion around marketing, remarketing, and continually engaging with their ICP if they want to have a chance at being that preferred supplier, don't they?
That's so true, actually. And it's funny. You made me recap my days at Sage. That was one of my previous experiences in the industrial space was helping sell ERP. My job was to basically disintermediate the channel. I was like the tip of the spear for the reason you just described, though, because Sage was a long in the tooth technology, right? It was on-prem at the time. They were trying to move to cloud, and the channel, a lot of them had gotten very wealthy off of those maintenance and support plan commissions and getting to platinum status or whatever, had their jets, but now we're coasting. And so Sage needed to grow, but they were captive to the channel. And I think I don't want to call that a monopoly per se, but it was. They also saw that those that wanted to do more looked at Sage and said, oh, no offense, Sage, out there if you're listening, but said, Sage isn't keeping up with the products. I got to go pick up new products to grow because I am young and hungry and want to do it.
Yes.
Right. So I think everybody has that mindset is nobody wants to be captive to anyone. And in the context of this data, this is your first party data. It's proprietary to you. Your customers don't have it. They don't know that this person in your ICP just visited your site.
Yes.
How can you take advantage of that in a methodical, brand appropriate way in collaboration with marketing and sales, right?
And let's talk about the technical implementation aspects of this, or the technical get up and running. Okay, cool. We're going to white glove you, whatever it is. Is it simply a JavaScript snippet that gets loaded onto the website that then triggers off all of your backend functionality? I'm guessing that this is something that they can get up and running with in under a day, typically, as long as they're an IT team or as long as they've got a website, which some of these guys don't even do e-commerce yet. They maybe have a brochure website with a contact page, and that's as far as it gets. And so I guess getting up and running with you is pretty simple, but what does the overall onboarding process look like in terms of, do you go in and do an audit of what they've got in their CRM? Where do we start when we engage with one of these manufacturers and distributors?
Yeah, it's quite simple. To your point, it's literally just dropping a line of code on your website. So it's 5 minutes is all it takes, so long as you do it properly.
Yes.
It does. And then there's this painful back and forth as we try to figure out why it's not firing properly because they put it in the wrong place or whatever. There was a security measure. But that is it. For 95%, it's 5 minutes. 95% of our first installs, it's clean, less than 5 minutes. Then it starts to fire and we start to capture visitor traffic. And what our script is looking for is someone that shows up bearing a cookie
Yes.
from a third-party provider that we've licensed this capability from. They've essentially created a data lake of opted-in first-party information. And what they provide, then they turn around with this data lake and license it to tech companies like us to build into our product. And so what we then do is when someone visits, we get what's called a hashed email. Are you familiar with a hashed email?
Yep.
Okay, it's a digital finger.
It's encrypted. It's encrypted effectively.
Yeah, we don't know who you are, but we do know that this string of alphanumeric characters, it's 45, 60 characters long, is unique to somebody's email address.
Yes.
And this is how Google and Meta and LinkedIn chase us around the internet after we've looked at a pair of shoes or a hoodie or something, right? Yeah. We take that that hashed email, and what's interesting is that about hashed emails is you could take any email and hash it to figure out what its unique line of code is, but you can't reverse engineer it. So we get this hashed email, we cannot reverse engineer it, but the way we get around that is we've licensed 2 other data sets. So we have another 320 million records of contacts, and we've hashed all 320 million of them.
Yes.
And we do that on a monthly basis. So when someone shows up, we go, is there a match? And if there is a match, we can pull the personal info out, run it through the filters of, is it in your ICP? Is it a valid email? And what is the relationship status? And then automatically sync it into your system. And so the data side of it, we've got knocked down now. That's very easy, very seamless. I think again, the opportunity / challenge is what do we do with it? Or what does our client do with it? Given capacity, given tech stacks, given all the things we talked about at the top of the call. And that's where I'm leaning in, but that's the fun stuff. Like that, it gets into some of that agentic. It could be agentic AI if we want to get sexy with it, but it doesn't to be. It can just be basic workflows that are high impact, that are tied to your priorities as a business. And that's the fun part, because that's more consultative and more focused on what is the client prioritizing this quarter, this half of the year, et cetera.
And I guess that's also where people like Kyler can come in and they can say, look, we need to make this part of our overall both internal retention strategy, but also our outreach strategy when it comes to email and other outreach campaigns. We need to make sure that we're running this harmoniously. We need to make sure that we have a unified view of that marketing data across our business so that we understand, okay, cool. These guys are not cold, but they're not hot. They're lukewarm maybe because we've identified them through a customer website visit, but they're not an existing customer of ours. Maybe they're not even an existing live opportunity in our CRM that we're already working, we're already communicating with them. This is effectively a brand new opportunity. We have to classify it as such, and we have to have a kind of a nurture flow associated with this versus a simple retention and value optimization flow. And so it's a very different way, I think, of looking at this, which is this needs to be looked at through the entire lens of our go-to-market, right? We cannot look at this in pure isolation. We have to understand how what we're doing in the rest of our go-to-market flywheel, what is it doing to those inbound requests to our website of unknown visitors, right? And we have to then say, look, okay, cool. This is cause and effect. This is something that's working. It's driving more pre-qualified traffic to our website, even if they're not a non-existing customer. Let's do more of that, right? Versus this isn't working that well. This isn't driving a lot of inbound traffic to our website that is within our target ICP. Let's do less of that. And so it feels like these businesses would do well to take a slightly broader view of their overall marketing program as opposed to looking at this as just like an isolated campaign based on visitors that we identify.
100%. Again, candidly, our primary goal is ROI for our clients, right? How can we get to convert and close more business and keep growing? The flip side of that coin, though, is efficiency, because there's an equal challenge for our clients, which is, hey, we don't have unlimited dollars to spend. Our budget is tight. And one of the areas where we're focusing on in the product is how can we help you understand for the first time, are you actually reaching the right people that you're paying for, because
Yes.
Google, et cetera, will only tell you who's showing up from paid search when they convert. But you paid for all those people that didn't convert, and you have no
Yes.
idea you get our clicks and views. And so now we're
Yes.
able to show you who those clicks and views are, or at least a portion of them. To be clear, it's about 20% of your traffic. I don't know if I said that earlier,
Yes.
but the law of large numbers, you start to get it gets more statistically significant about, hey, this is probably what it all looks like, right? And so one of the areas we're focusing on is let's look at all those UTM source equals CPC, cost per click, that are not in your ICP,
Yes.
and what is driving those, and how can we maybe take those dollars and reallocate them towards the things that are working. And then to your point about Kyler and others, yes, I think it's a huge opportunity. And I'm constantly trying to speak we talk about the Sage channel, with other channel partners to figure out how could we help them with this data, like to help them reinforce the value they're bringing to their clients. Again, that's all part of this big ecosystem that we all
Playing.
play in and try to support in every which way you can, as you're doing here.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. Now, is there anything that you don't do today that your customers are going, I know you do this, but we'd love it if you also did this? Or is there anything you're looking out next 6, 12, 18 months that you go, well, we don't do this today, but in 6 months, we will be doing this thing because we see yet another gap that we think we can fill for these businesses that we're working with? What's high on your radar over the next 6, 12,
Yeah,
18 months?
there's kind of two things I think in the bookends. One is how can we keep improving the quality of the data that we resolve?
Yes.
That is tough. It's
Yeah.
not clean, right?
Yeah.
I always say, let's not let any perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah.
And take some of this, there will be some mistakes in there. It is what it is, but there is enough good in there to make hay out of. So that's one of the areas, is how do we keep improving the data quality? The second is the other extreme, which is the take action side of things, and the automation and the agentic AI is, I would say, but just the workflow side of things. And I'm personally leaning in a lot, and this is where I'm also looking for channel partners to assist, because this is the professional service side of things. But how could we identify those patterns, those repeatable patterns that we could bake into the product that become more scalable and universally applied? And that's a tug of, as you probably know, things are moving so fast right now in tech, and there's all these new technologies springing up. And my co-founder and I are constantly like, do we build it ourselves and now we get sucked into this ever dynamic thing, or do we stick to our knitting, be really good at it, and then just get really smart in a modular way about taking best of breed tools to the tech stack and make those available to people? It's a tough challenge, especially when you're lean.
And I think it's exacerbated by the fact that there's no marketing automation platform out there yet today. Jay Schneider, he's working on Flywheel, and there's a couple of others working on solutions, but there's no Klaviyo for B2B, right? It doesn't exist yet. And so the reality is that most of the marketing automation and even the CDP platforms out there, they're based on one customer, one email address. They're not based on account-based marketing, right? Which is what you get in the B2B world. We need to holistically look at how we're marketing to an account, not an individual buyer or user under that account. And I think that's the real challenge, is how do we make sure that we are approaching these opportunities both individually, but also collectively underneath the banner of a corporate buyer, for example, and underneath the umbrella of a standardized domain. You might have 5 people that visit your website, but they work for the same company, so they have the same domain name in their email. And so how do we treat those differently to how we would an individual buyer with a Gmail address, and we don't necessarily know what company they're from or whatever? And so I think there's this challenge still to be resolved in the B2B world around marketing automation that is designed specifically for B2Bs. That just doesn't, there just hasn't been a clear winner there yet. And most of these businesses, in my experience, they run all their email marketing through their account managers and their named accounts, and they send them directly from their email address, or they send a batch and blast out of the CRM to all the customers that are found in their CRM, and the CRM sends the email. And so this is a really hard challenge, I think, is who's going to actually own the communication that your system prompts, and that's the challenge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And which is the tech challenge. It's how do you take a best of breed approach and just keep swapping them out, or do you build it? I'm personally partial right now, at least, to like HubSpot for a lot of that. But
Yep.
even HubSpot is not good for sending emails, the email side of HubSpot, that is, to people that haven't opted in just yet. They'll throttle you really quickly, right? So
Yes.
then you almost need another marketing platform or email platform, whether it's a MailChimp or other, to handle that type of stuff.
Absolutely. And have warmed domain name. Even if you have a custom subdomain for just emailing those types of customers, you need a dedicated sending IP, and you need all this infrastructure in place to be able to send out these quote unquote cold emails in many instances to be able to get into the inbox.
Yeah. And I'm encouraged by my B2B e-commerce clients because I have both. I have e-commerce B2B, but I also have industrial B2B where they don't have it yet. And I am encouraged that the B2B e-commerce are a hybrid between what I'd say where the industrial companies are per se and where my SaaS clients are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
things about warming up domains and protecting your domain and like they get it. Right.
Yeah.
So they've learned from the D2C side of the house and are doing a great job.
Yeah, and they don't want to get burnt, so they're real cautious about
Or
protecting their sending IPs and protecting their domain. So they don't want their
exactly.
domain getting blacklisted. I totally get that. Listen, this has been a fantastic conversation. It's super cool what you're doing. It's super cool that your target market is that sort of industrial manufacturing distribution space. I think it's underserved. I still think it's underserved massively compared to when we look at the B2C and D2C world. There's plenty of in every granular digital function within the B2C and D2C world. There are specialists in that. We don't really have that too much yet in the B2B world. There's the B2B Ecommerce Association is working real hard to try to improve that situation and bring a baseline of education to the industry, but it's early days. It's early days still. And that, that younger generation of B2B buyers, they are demanding it. They're demanding us to raise our standards digitally across the whole of the B2B world. And I'm grateful for people like you and Kyler and the VBA and a bunch of my friends in the industry. I'm really grateful that we're all working together to pull in the same direction like sled dogs, and that gives me hope that give us another couple of years, and these digital chops, these digital capabilities will be a lot more common in the B2B world. And I that gives me a lot of hope and excitement about the future for sure. Now, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. I'll drop a link to your website in the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you?
You can contact me directly at brad@revmethods.com, RevMethods.com, or you can just go to our website and talk to me. Click the want to talk.
I love it. I love it. And I'm starting to introduce this one last question to my guests, and that is, if you could change one thing and one thing only about our industry, what would it be?
If I could change one thing and one thing only about our industry, what would it be? To look outside your industry for insights and ideas that you can transfer over. Because I think that's a big opportunity for folks to not think that we're so unique that what works over there won't work here. Because I think it very much can and does. And I've always been a proponent of trying to be that catalyst of bringing new ideas cross-channel, cross-vertical.
Man, I couldn't agree more. Cross-pollination of ideas and inspiration. I absolutely love that. I urge it every opportunity I get with my clients. So I absolutely love that answer. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you, let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So Mr. Brad Myers from RevMethods, what is your question for me today?
Yeah, several personal questions, but let me stick with this one. What piece of advice do you find yourself giving over and over again that you wish people took more action on in e-commerce specifically? Your personal.
Yeah. It is crawl, walk, run. That is the single biggest sort of piece of advice that I give over and over and over again, and helping manufacturers and distributors understand what that means in their context is the hard part. It's how do I communicate that in a way that doesn't come across as condescending and it comes across as respectful. But it's, if you don't do e-commerce at all today, or your e-commerce website is a decade old and it's some custom built thing that sits in a server room somewhere, and even your sales reps don't recommend it because it's so crappy of an experience, we got to get back to the basics here. We got to get back to the basics of product, content, quality. We have to get back to the basics of customer data quality. There's so many foundational elements to doing digital commerce well in the B2B world. And if those basics are not in place, then slapping a shiny new $300,000 front end on it is not going to solve your problems. Right. So even if you've got the mandate and the budget from the board to go and implement this newfangled e-commerce experience or whatever it is. Let's go back to basics here and let's dig in under the bonnet. Let's bring the skeletons out of the closet. Let's understand your current sales workflow and what that looks like. And let's understand how we can give your salespeople superpowers through these digital capabilities. Let's really understand. If you aren't doing customer research already and you have never done customer research, and ask them about what they're looking for that you don't yet deliver digitally and in every other way, because we can augment your business digitally in lots of functions, not just e-commerce. And so I think supporting and encouraging those types of conversations with customers before we even get into scoping a solution, I think that's really important. It's those foundational building blocks that will encourage success of your digital projects and your digital programs. And the other thing that falls out of that crawl, walk, run approach is this is not a one and done project. This is a program of work that that is never ending. You will have to continue to invest and give love into this forever, because the market is constantly changing. Now, sure, there usually is some kind of a big bang project up front to get you up and running and stand that up, but you're going to constantly be enhancing and adding new functionality over time to meet your customers' needs in new ways. You're going to continually be doing that. This is not a one and done project. This is a program that you have to operationalize in your business. And so if we can't figure out a way to do that, don't go and drop $100,000 to $500,000 on this project and think it's a silver bullet, because it won't be.
Wait, can I ask a quick follow-up?
Of course.
When you say crawl, walk, run, totally agree with you. But when you see them, because you're repeating it often enough, is what you're finding they don't even go to crawl because it's an action is what you're fighting? Or is the other extreme, which is they went straight to run and they dropped $500,000 or $1 million on something and now it's sitting in the shed?
It's more often the latter, which is that they've had 1, 2, or 3 false starts at this, and they're pulling their hair out and they're saying enough is enough. We can't have any more misfires on this. Otherwise, the board's going to pull funding for all digital operations in the business. And so we need you to help shepherd us, because I don't do implementations. I'm a pure consultancy, but I come from agency background and brand background. So I get how hard this is. And so they are saying, look, we just cannot afford to get this wrong, because we got one shot to prove to the board here that we can get at least a small POC type of a project over the line here that actually starts to drive some not only real revenue, but drives a much improved customer experience as a result that our customers rave about and meet those customers' needs that they've already communicated to us. If we can't do that, then we will never get funding for the ongoing bit. So we got to show some pretty quick wins pretty quickly here. Otherwise, it's going to be real hard to convince our board we know what the hell we're doing. And that's oftentimes they're looking for the air cover of a consultant to come in and say, yeah, you're on the right track, or no, you're not on the right track. Here's a direction I think you could go that would be much more beneficial and much more fruitful for you and a lot less expensive. When I was at this Google AI symposium last week, there was a manufacturer that stood up and said, look, every single AI initiative that we're looking at in terms of a proof of concept is like a $5 million proof of concept. And I'm like, and everybody up there in the panel was saying, that shouldn't be the case. That doesn't need to be the case. Now, maybe the vendors that you're talking to would like it to be the case, but it doesn't have to be the case. And so sometimes it takes an independent third party, an independent consultant, somebody who's not aligned with any one technology or one vendor, to come in and say, there's 3 or 4 ways you could do this. There's pros and cons to each. Let me walk you through those. And that they just want a little bit of hand holding, and they want some borrowed confidence from you that they're going in the right direction. That's what they want. Listen, this has been a fabulous discussion. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.